Okay, we were talking about your chest and your width of chest from swimming, not only that, but consciously expanding it.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you made a comment about my chest looks big, large. And I said
Yeah.
yes because of all the breathing that I grew up doing, swimming, especially with breath holding. But anyway, that moment is lost. Let's move on to something else. good, good day again.
All right.
It's hard to recapture a moment when you're in trance. That's why we should just go right away to if there was whatever the conversation is. Doesn't matter. Anyway.
Okay, so the intention of this conversation is to ask you questions that, with the for public, for sending or for creating a document that we can send to people, whatever comes. But there's some questions that came up, and it all began with you saying, the very nice. Man says he hasn't had hunger in 20 years because he changed his behavior from an eating machine to a breathing machine. So there's a lot in that. So just asking you the first question, you said you've not felt hunger in 20 years. So what do you mean by that exactly?
There's no desire to eat. There's no biological process that gives me the signal that I need to eat. I don't have low blood sugar. I don't have issues associated with ill health or lack of energy because I become more efficient as what we really are as a breathing machine.
So what changed in your body, your mind, and your life when you started just living more from breath? What happened in your body first, and then your mind?
Well, okay. Well, the whole thing is it's some this format of question is kind of like it's stifling in some ways instead of.
Okay.
But it's good. I have to. The question is leading to something else. Really, what we're gonna, I think we're gonna speak into terms here. Is there's so much history and background. We have to start somewhere. And I'm writing and I always this book about me and the journey, and I think that's an important aspect of how I've ascertained this information. So I think that as what come to me in the time that we said we're going to record to now is like, okay, well, we're going to speak and we're going to create the autobiography of a reluctant yogi.
Okay.
It's a play on, but remember I told you before, like the Anne Rice interview with Vampire, and also the Jane Roberts, where this interview process of a channeling energy, I mean, it's
so this is me interviewing breath itself, and you are whatever you're
I'm the channel and the physical manifestation of that energy of breath. of what we all are. I represent something that needs to be represented because it's given very little thought anymore. So much thought is given to food, and food is a lesser of a need, of a greater need in the bigger picture of what really makes life into itself, and its breath. Even water is minuscule in its need and importance, especially if you think about in every breath we take, there's 2 to 5% water vapor that's available there. That if you could actually capture the energy that is in breath, but you're also capturing the energy of the water that is in the air as well. You're being like a plant, right? you're being like so many things that you're living in tune with nature, and you're living by truths. Food as a need is way down the list of what actually makes life exist. Comparatively speaking, with like the 3 laws of survival, right? 3 days without, 3 minutes without breath, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Divide the amount of time. And those are things you need to procure in order to survive.
So, I mean, when we look at indigenous, when I say indigenous, I mean people who live traditionally, and I mean people who live, say, still in a very, centuries old way in the Amazon or other places in Africa, or Aboriginals, who don't eat very much either, and they're living in symbiotic relationship with the environment. You're saying that, what we've done in moving into industrialized nations, that's destroyed our breath, and this machine that you're saying, a biomachine that we have.
Yeah, I didn't catch that last something machine.
This is that what we embody as a biomachine.
Well, yeah, I mean, really, what if you look at the body and how the body works, right? The body is a biological machine, and so who is the operator? Is the body the operator, or and that's in control? I mean, or is there something that's, most people would like to think that they have some kind of control over their life. I mean, it gets into the great philosophical question, right? And so are you working the machine, or is the machine working you? And that's what most people are doing. And that's what genetics are doing. That's what conditioning is doing. That's what society is doing. That's what parents, friends, and everything else. Or do you have some control in your life? And the only control that I have is to be reactionary. And how do I control being reactionary to an impetus? Is by breathing. And so whenever something happens, and I've learned to take breath on as the governing tool of working this biological machine. Again, 3 laws of survival: 3 minutes without breath, 3 weeks without food is 10,080 times more important to breathe than it is to eat. So if you're a logical, intelligent being, would you think about anything else than your breath for your health system? But people just don't look at it that way.
Yeah, and I know from my experience that because most people's lives, we've never been invited to look at our breath. We just don't think about it.
It's given very little thought.
Yeah.
I mean, people have practices of breath. They go and do meditation, even though people would argue that meditation isn't about breath, but it's, but anyway, that's another whole 10-hour talk that we could get into on that. But most people have just a breath practice. They might have their breath practice in an hour of yoga. They might have an hour of Pilates 3 days a week. That's their breath practice. I used to have an extreme breath practice of wanting to be a triathlete or a professional triathlete. I used to train 35 hours a week. And I actually lived that lifestyle, even though I wasn't competing anymore on that level. I always played ball sports, basketball, volleyball, extreme mountain biker. In fact, my life was dedicated to living in 7 states in 6 years to follow the endless summer of mountain biking. I actually drove through Mexico and Central America and took a mountain bike and mountain biked in places that very few have traveled or even mountain biked in the bottom of the Copper Canyon and the highlands in Chiapas and so forth and so on. But my whole life was dedicated to this idea of forced breath through exercise. So I've done extreme amounts of athletic endeavors and pushed my breath to places deeper than most people could ever imagine to. A super fit being. But I still found myself going through problems in my life wrapped around the rest of the time that I wasn't training, because I wasn't consciously breathing during those times. Everything transformed to me when I started doing 8 to 14 hours of yoga breath work a day, and I made it my behavioral pattern. Made myself a conditioned super breather at all times by practicing an understanding the mechanisms of breath and how they play on the body, how they work with the body, what governs them, and just becoming more efficient with every single breath I took.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest important part of breath is not inhalation like most people think. Every practice that I've ever been involved with, everything that I've seen and everything that I've done, and you can look at all over, everyone will say, let's take a big breath in. Okay, let's look at the mechanisms behind what's going on when you start with an inhalation.
Okay.
All that residual aspect of your lungs that you've had this stagnant air sitting around without moving is still there. So when you take a big breath in, and all this resistance and all this stagnant air that's sitting around in your lungs, you're minimizing the amount of fresh air that you could get in with every single breath you have. So you might have a diminished capacity, let's say at best at 50%, because the rest of the air in your lungs is just sitting there, and it's been sitting there, and it's just like food sitting out for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe 100 years. But the thing is, that all that stagnant air that just been sitting there because it has your conscious breathing hasn't been worked enough. Especially, when you're out there cycling, you're forcing this to happen. But most people, when they're sedentary and they're walking around and they're sitting at a chair, they have all the stagnant air sitting in their lungs. So they're breathing and minimizing the capacity of how much new fresh air they could get in. So for the first thing is that the first thing you should do is you should always take an exhalation fully to try to empty all that residual air that's been sitting in the lungs. So then when you do take your first breath in on a practice, whatever it is, or just a way of life like I have done, you're actually increasing the amount of fresh air by magnitude of at least twice, but I would say probably like much more of a, you're probably increasing your capacity of breathing 90% of new fresh air in by just simply changing to an exhalation first, so you can get rid of all that toxic waste and crap that's sitting in residually into your lungs, and then taking a full fresh.
And is it right? I mean, I'm just remembering you also said something when we first met many years ago, that for example, if I exhale gently, if I breathe in, I'm breathing in exactly what I've just breathed out my mouth, rather than turning my head or, I breathe in.
Yeah, but we don't want to complicate, there's a lot of different techniques to go along with that, as well. But the thing is, though, you got to teach people in steps of understanding how to doing things. I mean, and this is where my training of being involved with athletics, being around high level of coaches, Olympic, I competed against future and world record holders in swimming, Olympians, and Olympic coaches. And I've had exposure to so many different breathing techniques, but also the training methodology. And when I used to teach children to swim, you just do simple techniques in the beginning. You're concentrated on kicking before you ever bring the arms in. It's one step at a time. And so to me, we don't want to, I don't think we want to necessarily overcomplicate things and making it on a way to teach people, right? Because then you start thinking too much. And this is not about thinking, it's about being. And so when you have all these little nuances, and people do that all the time, and all these practices that they do, they overthink it, and so then they miss the whole point of what the state of breath brings you into.
So it's like just to say on this point that I've got a new friend, and I introduced her to this, what we were talking about in conscious breath, and she's been doing it, and she said that it's so simple, yet it's actually it's very different, because you can be aware of your breath, you can do techniques, but if you're actually not attending to it while you're doing it, you can count to 4 or 5, but you're not actually fully conscious of the breath and the experience itself, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the methods out there are very much doing this number, that technique. It's a technique that matters, whereas I believe what you're saying is it's your consciousness. You're aware of the breath experience itself. You're fully in it until, as you say, you become breath as you are.
Yeah, it's just about being in that flow state of breathing fully and deeply at all times. It's about minimizing the energy that it takes and to get more energy. It's just in a very efficient way. Well, I mean, let's talk about what's going on. Really, we talk about exhalation. Why exhalation is so important. When you exhale, it's not only you're getting all that waste product out. I mean, 85% of all fat is exhaled out. I'm going to be generalizing. There's studies that show multitude sides of more or less around these, but these are pretty general baseline stuff that people have taken for, at least seen in studies that are out there. I come from a scientist background. I come from studying exercise physiology. While I was wanting a wannabe professional triathlete, everything that I learned in the labs and in all the teachings, I applied to myself. I became the science lab, and I was taught by my exercise physiologist, was a world-class discus thrower. And when he measured me, when we got on the treadmill, I was unremarkable. I had a high capacity to be able to tolerate higher levels, but unremarkable compared to world-class athletes. So it was, but it didn't matter. I was taught that you could only increase your VO2 max, the amount of liters you can consume in liters per minute, is only 10 to 20%, means that you could only change your genetics 10 to 20%. So you're limited by your natural genetic predisposition. But to me, that always never made sense to me, that I knew there was more to the picture and than just something that could be, put on a data and recorded while you're doing running on a treadmill. But anyway, so everything that always had to have the rigorous understanding behind science, even though I read about things like breatharianism and people having these super abilities, siddha abilities, otherworldly abilities, and books like Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, and Carlos Castaneda series, and anything that was out there. I couldn't explain it. But I knew that it existed, but at science, it didn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, how can someone live without eating? That's an impossibility. But until it happened to me. And really, it was a byproduct. This whole idea that I haven't had hunger in 20 years is a byproduct of, I went through a process of doing 8 to 14 hours of yoga breathing a day, while the rest of the time I was out working, and I was working as a bartender in the Napa Valley in a town called Calistoga, a very famous place, at one of the famous restaurants. And I worked there in the evening time, and then every time, the rest of my time, I was home doing yoga, breathing, stretching. I mean, the combination of all this 8 to 14 hours. So I transformed my life from what I call, from being a non-breather, a non-conscious breather, to a breather.
I mean, if I hear that, that's it goes from extreme sport to extreme breath.
Yeah, I've taken the same dedication and the same amount of when you practice sport. I'm not swimming. I'm only swimming 4 hours a day, or when I used to being in youth programs. But then it was only when I was doing triathlete, it only had to be a certain time. You're not spending your time swimming all the time, right? And so the thing is, or you're not running all the time. And what happened also is my body started breaking down, because I've put so much application and jumping, playing basketball and volleyball, that pounding and falling, mountain biking, it's 50 miles an hour on the road, or even running in the jarring, it takes its toll on the body. And so I couldn't afford injury anymore, and it became, you know, a choice of work or not work. And I worked with my body as being a bartender. And so I got deep into, and I've always been into the healing modalities, and I'm a Reiki master, though I don't ever practice it. So I don't ever like to call myself something anyway. But I've studied and been a part of trainings with people who have acupuncture, massage, and it's been a part of my life. And so I've always been you know, to me, it's always been the self healer. So through stretching and massage and icing and all the techniques that I've learned, I've been able to do a pretty good job of self-healing. But then I got into like breath as the most self-healing thing. And while being a bartender, serving food and drink and then losing all hunger, it was quite...
And it was over, do you know how was it over months and then it suddenly happened, or do you remember if it...
Well, I've been working with my breath for a long time, and it was, and I've been practicing. I went through a rebirthing Leonard Orr thing, and I went a few years prior, and so I've been practicing breathing techniques. I've been brought by in situations and friends and circles that I'm involved with. I've been taught different breathing techniques. Some said that they were the type of breathing that was taught at Ananda, which is Yogananda's place, and that's called Kundalini, you know, or Kriya Yoga. And there's a certain style of breathing. So what I've done is I've incorporated all the things that I've known, and it's progressed in me, and I just worked with my breath. But it's really just a simple breathing technique, and everyone knows it. It's called pranayama. And so I just went in through the nose and out through the mouth, in through the nose and out through the mouth. I mean, it's just a basic principle about breath that is musicians are taught that kind of circular breathing, and that's what it's called, circular breathing. And they're able to, like Miles Davis, be able to blow through that horn for extended periods, longest periods of time, because they're circular breathing. Or, you know, your famous saxophonists, they have to all practice this. And actually, anyone who is going to be good at what they do, and drummers, you think about it, the high intensity in any kind of musician, they have to. They just don't think about it, but they have to be good breathers, or you're just going to wear out. And so, and even singers, you know, they say that they get this extreme euphoric feeling from singing in itself, you know, because you're deacidifying the body when you do every. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm aware of when I breathe out, exhale. There's a moment when I either put my tongue, so that I can breathe through my nose, I have to put my tongue to my roof of my mouth, or hold muscles at the back. Because I'm aware that if I'm nose it out, and then I'm going to have my tongue at the roof of my mouth to block the going in my mouth. And then if I'm asleep at night, I'm aware that because this is what I'm interested with, this sleeping at night and how doing this regularly throughout the day affects it. Because a lot of people have sleep apnea.
Yep.
So therefore, if they're breathing through their mouth, does that not require to breathe through your nose? You have to sort of block the mouth if they put the tongue up.
Well, no, the thing is, maybe in the beginning, because people aren't used to working with their tongue, you know, the tongue is the strongest muscle in the body for size, the very strongest muscle for mastication, for you know, just you're just chewing up you know, and all that kind of stuff. But you don't have to be. I mean, I just tried it right now. I could breathe through my nose with my tongue in a relaxed position, and really, that's what everything is about. Efficiency is being relaxed in every process of every muscle, right? And the rigidity, you know, and the expression of rigidity in the body, it has an expression of rigidity in your nature, and your nervous system is more taut when you're more rigid. And so things should be able to be done loosely, you know. So in the beginning, yeah, because you're practicing, because you're not good at it. I've been working with people, and I work with people on a daily existence. Just in, if someone comes to me and they have a problem with something, and I know that their breathing patterns can change, it's quite easy. People go to me, it's like, oh well, I can't breathe well from my nose. So that's their excuse for breathing through their mouth. Well, duh, it takes practice, right? It's dedication to something. You have to work at it. Yeah.
Well, as you're speaking, I'm also trying to. If I shut my mouth, my lips, I can breathe through my nose with my tongue relaxed. But then, if that would require me to, if I sleep at night, my mouth has to open and close all the time. I don't even know if I can do that. So I'm interested. This is the first time I'm noticing.
No, but it's practice makes perfect. My wife said when you sleep that I have this, I snore. I don't, people, this whole snoring thing is just like, and it's different. Everyone has these, but I don't have sleep apnea, and I'm just talking in general sense. But sleep apnea, I mean, if you change behavior throughout the day, it's going to bleed over into your sleep. The thing is, people are poor sleepers because they're overeaters and they eat late, and so there's multitudes of problems with overweight, sleeping on poor on your side, on your back, your stomach, grinding is another thing that that people do, right? There's so many issues. Well, people oversleep. It's because people have oversleep because their body is so worn out from eating all this food that they have to process. And then the processing of all the crap that they have to do to acquire that food. The energy is involved that people buy into in this whole pyramidal scheme is just ridiculous. It takes a lot of energy, and we don't have to buy into the system this way.
I'm just saying, if anyone's listening to this, I do notice that the more that you do work on your breath, and you're actually also training your awareness, you're becoming more awake. And then you realize as you eat something, my goodness, this feels the energy required in my body. I can feel processing all the food that I'm eating right now. And that takes at least an hour and a half.
Yeah. Well, and then when we eat complex meals. And so when you eat a complex meal and you have all these different things in there, and we have different digestive enzymes, and they're all fighting over each other to get in to break down their stuff. And then we drink all this water while we eat, or at best, people drink water. But people are drinking wine and beer and alcohol on top of this tremendous amount of food. And just think about how, overloaded and how much energy it takes to process that. And then people eat at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. And then they expect to go to bed at 11, 12, and think that they're going to have good dreams, or they're going to be able to, people need to start taking responsibility for their own actions and what's going on. You have poor breathing habits, and think about how hard it is to breathe when you're on a full stomach like that. You can't. It just, people barely even go for walks after they eat, to help kickstart the process. And then they end up putting sugar on top of a full meal with all the alcohol and everything else, and sugar stops digestion. So really, if you're going to be eating a big meal, start with your dessert first. And actually, then you probably you'll be sated, and you'll just save yourself and not eat the rest of the food. But it's just ridiculous on, and I see it every day. I work in a wannabe Michelin starred, a famous chef restaurant in Hillsborough, California. I serve, we have two dinner options. We have 3-course, $83, and 6-course, $139, with or without wine pairing.
6 courses. Wow.
6. Well, they're smaller courses, but it's still more food than. And we used to serve a lot more food than that. People can't even finish it by the end because it was too much food. We still can't. But people are doing this, and then they're having all this wine on top of it. And they've been drinking all day long. I live in Disneyland, a wine country, one of them, and food and wine. And so it's just the body struggles, and so if we want to start looking at people and why they have problems with sleep apnea, let's start looking at their behavioral problems throughout the day. People, it's easy enough to fix those, and you can fix all that stuff with breath. You know where hunger comes from? Hunger comes from a lack of energy, right? And you could get your energy one way or the other. You could put food in there, but food is like gasoline. It takes more energy to make gas from petroleum than it is the energy we get out of gas. Food is the same way. And if you think about from farm, to whatever, maybe processed where a lot of people eat, to the market, to us having to go buy it at the market, then us having to take it home, then us having to store it, then prepare it, cook, they would cook it, to eat it, then clean up after it. And I just think about how much energy that whole process is just for, and we do that 3 times a day. Some people more, I don't know. I mean, I don't, but there's a lot of people that are going through that. And that's why people go out and eat a lot. Then they're trusting whoever to make their food for them and think that it's going to be okay. But the energy is necessary. And if you think about energy in itself and breath, we just don't think about the breath as an energy system and how to work that energy system into itself. And so anytime that you put food in the energy that it takes to even to get it to your mouth and then to eat it, and then to process it, it's like all the digestive enzymes and how they're fighting over with these mills that are just enormous, and also, they're fighting over each other. And and then you go through a comatose period because all that blood has to go through and get into your stomach, right? And so it's got to start digesting it down, and it takes a lot of work. That's why you go through these ups and downs with food too.
Can you also share and be clear that you're, because I know in the Breatharianism Beyond group, you're saying this is not about fasting, not writing about not eating as some kind of achievement. This is about breath.
Oh no, I mean, it's great that you brought this point up because I actually wrote it down. Food, and I've shared this with the community of breatharianisms because it's important. Food has always been my ally. I've always utilized food as a way of health and well-being. It's never been an issue for me. I've always wanted to exercise. I always had this adage that I'm going to exercise my whole life so I can eat whatever I want. It's most importantly ice cream. That's, okay, coffee and ice cream, but I don't consider coffee eating, right? I mean, it's not. And I'm never going to go without my coffee. I don't care if I'm going to do a 7-day retreat where I don't eat. I don't call it fasting because this has nothing to do with fasting. Means that you're staying away from food, you're going away from food, you're giving up food, you're doing something, but it's about food. This has nothing to do without food. This is 1,000%, 1,000,000% about breath. And it's replacing the energy and understanding and getting your energy directly from breath, which is an extremely more efficient way of garnering energy than food. Most hunger is a process of down energy. And so then people eat to placate themselves. It's just they're playing with their senses mostly, and it's a requirement. But they just give it very little thought about breath unto itself.
And just to be clear, because I'm just thinking of how my people. So imagine I hear this for the first time. I say, okay, I'm going to eat less at lunch and dinner.
No, it's not about eating less. It's about breathing and just seeing what the byproducts of breath bring you. The thing is, it's not the focus is nothing about that. It didn't happen to me that way. I never tried to be a breatharian. It came as a process of doing 8 to 14 hours of yoga, breathing a day. I was astounded that it happened to me. I don't know why, but my whole energy changed. I was extremely high on not eating. I was actually asked a question. I used to be part of the Institute of Hypnotic Sciences, the Santa Rosa meetup group. This was founded by Edgar Mitchell, the 6th man to walk on the moon, as a way of what is gnosis. And so I was a part of the steering committee for this group. And we had Master Gu, who was like the 2012 Qigong Master of the Year, and he gave a talk at our group. And I asked him, and he afterwards, and after the talk, and I told him what happened to me, and he asked me this question. He goes, "Do you feel better?" Because I told him, that I went through this process of all this breathing. He went to Qigong school in China, and he asked me, he goes, "Do you feel better when you don't eat or you do eat?" And I said, "Actually, I feel better when I don't," because the energy requirement to break down food, and there's always some kind of emotional. But I was high off of this whole process. Uh, and he goes, "Well, I never." He goes, "I've heard about people in Qigong school in China, about people that knew people that this happened to them, but he goes, it would never happen to me because I enjoy food too much." So this has nothing about, giving up food, because it's a choice. The thing is, I eat now because I make choices around eating. I understand that there's certain ways to eat that will help in the healing process or the longevity process. I also eat because there's enjoyment into the eating. What happened to me is, when I went through this process, I became hung up on the idea of not eating, and I was afraid if I went back to be an eater, that I wouldn't be able to continue to do this. And so it became this attachment, because I wanted to show the world that something miraculously happened to me, but no one would believe me. Um, but it became an attachment unto itself. Because if you could process the energy, it shouldn't matter whether you eat or not. I could still eat, and I do. I eat certain things, but I really limit what I eat, and I certainly don't eat like other people eat. Caloric intake would probably be 700 or 800 probably calories a day, maybe more. What I eat, it doesn't matter. I don't. It doesn't matter what I eat, because the energy in food is marginal, compared to extremely marginal to being in the state of breath and be able to
And
process.
just to be clear, you're not talking about the difference between like eating as people normally do and breathing. It's conscious breath.
Yeah, well, I've made conscious breathing my normal state of breath. I live in a meditative state. Of course, I have a practice that I'll go but I'm doing it, and I'm working it all the time. So I'm doing it. I have different levels of pushing it and degrees of things when I have more, time dedicated to what I call floor work. But I'm doing it in everything that I'm doing. I'm being an extremely conscious breather at all times. It's called active meditation. I live in a meditative state. So what does that mean? And well, it means that I could chop wood and carry water. And then when the outside impetus and things that happen around the world, or happen in my individual life, or while I'm stressed at work, or where I work in a very stressful situation as being a high-end waiter, whatever you want to call it, garçon. Because it taxes your mind, and people become overcome. It taxes your body. And what happens that most people fail is because they stop breathing consciously. And so what happens is, when you stop breathing consciously, when you have all this stress and your mind is stressed and is burning all this oxygen, people's breath stops. And so then they shut down, and people just don't, they make mistakes. They don't think as clearly. And so the whole process of breath makes you, you could practice this state of meditation. You don't have to be in a cave. You can practice this state of meditation at all times, and that's when it should be practiced, because then you're reinforcing it. Then you're making it your way of life. It would be nice to be able to go live in a cave, and I would have no problem with that. Being alone, I'm very comfortable with that. But that's my life requires me, at least from what I think, is that it requires me to be out here in the public and giving back to people.
So do you see this evolving in a specific way, or is it, we're doing something in August, of course. I'm because it's for people to really get into this and going to trainings and then making it part of their life, as part of a community. Have you seen, for example, in the Breatharian and Beyond group, people are having breakthroughs in their lives? Did you notice that?
No, no. Well, I saw very few people, and very few people like the honesty and integrity of the message that I was delivering. I mean, and it's, because it's really I had one person that came through and understood that everything that they were looking for was in their breath. They got it. They finally got it. They understood. But a lot of people, especially in the breatharian communities, and I think this is everywhere in the world, that people are really hung up on the food source. I mean, people have serious food issues, and I think that's most people. Ozempic, why I've seen it that people come in and they'll have a couple cocktails, glasses of wine, 4 courses, and all this kind of food, then they say, I have diabetes. Do you have any sugar-free desserts? And I'm just like, oh my God, people want to take medicines all the time, and the best medicine that we have is not overconsumption. Understanding, taking responsibility. Our dis-ease, in our body, our discomfort, all comes from acidity. Acidity is the killer. Disease cannot grow. Cancer cannot grow without it in an acidic environment. The most efficient and really only way of deacidifying the body is through exhalation. That's how we get rid of the waste product from the mitochondria in the cell, is through exhalation. And if you want to become less acidic, if you want to become less negative energy, pH negative, the ancients been saying that for years, thousands and eons, forever, is you exhale out. You get rid of the crap.
If somebody is noticing, or other people notice, they're very negative, they've got low energy, they're complaining all the time, regardless of, I'd say everybody alive today is living in social economic stress and trauma from, whatever, hundreds of years. So it's like we're all traumatized in our own ways, and we have our own breath patterns because of that. Long-term trauma creates that in the chest, and as you know, of course. And I'd like to hear more about that, because that's what my journey is. And I'm sure a lot of people out there listening are going through that similar kind of journey. So this thing about making it conscious and then becoming more positive and more energized, that's a natural result, is it?
It's a byproduct.
I
mean, to me, it's like, it's about everything. We're a machine. So what is your byproduct? To me, it's like, are you the operator? Can you operate that forklift? Can you operate that crane? Can you operate that car? Can you operate that bicycle? Who's operating those hands when you flip someone the bird, right? when you're kissing someone, right? I mean, and it's just being understanding and how to be a better operator. If you understand the mechanism, so much information, so much intelligence out there, but there's so many lies that are going on right now, and it's not lies that people are doing intentionally, but no one's just looking at the paradigm. And I'm here to shift the paradigm. I'm here to share the truth behind it. When it happened to me, and it wasn't about, to me, it was a do or die situation. My daughter just went to Hawaii, and it devastated me. Her mom took her over there, and my whole life had been dedicated to this little girl. Not my whole life, but whatever. The point of time that she was very important to me, and I was devastated. And what was I going to do? And so I took every tool that I read, and I read thousands of books, self-help, Herman Hesse is my favorite author. I mean, whatever, and everything that came across, I read a lot. and all the teachings that I've had along the way, you know, all I said, I can't succumb to this. And so I said, I'm going to dedicate my life to this process of breath, because it was the only answer, and it was the only common thing in this whole search that I've been looking for this information of what is the meaning of life since I was 9 years old or before. And you know, this has been the age-old question to me. It's like, what is life? What does this mean? I've been thinking about this my whole existence. And it came to me as breath. And I laughed. And I laughed about how stupid we are about not understanding and working this system of breath. It's a 10,000 times more important than any food can ever be, yet we give it so little credence. And it changed my life. And for a year and a half, I went through this process, and I kept up 8 to 14 hours a day while being a bartender, not eating, while I'm serving people all these alcohol and you know, and food and all this kind of stuff. We're not needing to eat. And for a year and a half, I prayed, and I had intentions, and I prayed and I breathed, which is, to me, is breath is pray. It's about creating through your breath, you know, and mantras. And a year and a half later, my daughter, her mom moved back from Hawaii to Calistoga. But there was always, when you always have to be careful when your prayers are answered, or if you don't make sure that you fully understood that there's other ramifications that go along with those. So I allowed her mom and her boyfriend to live with me until they found their own place. So breath, you know, breath could, it's a very powerful tool of manifestation as well. You know, I mean, and when you start getting good at breathing, you can slow things down where what the impossible can be possible, as long as you dedicate yourself to it.
Just before we go into that bit, I'm interested in this because I would say that most people don't have the dedication or the, you know, training in athletics or whatever kind of training to do 8 hours a day, and even then. But you're saying that, you know, I know that there's a lot of pain involved with breathing consciously for a while, because you start to realize, like, for example, I know because I don't breathe fully up into my chest because I've got a lot of pain held there, and that to release that requires fully going through the belly up through the solar plexus up into the head, even because a lot of stress people's heads because they're not fully breathing up that high. So immediately they'll have, I mean, obviously you had your story, but have you seen how it affects people within 2 weeks, a month, 6 months?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing is, you can do it 8 hours a day. That's the whole point about this. It's not about me sitting there doing this, you know, 8 to 14. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that I still had to go do certain things, but while I was walking, while I was riding a bike, while I was gardening, the thing is, when I would say 8 to 14 hours a day, that means that of course, there's a lot of other things that are going along with it, but what it is, it's about incorporating and breathing into everything that you do. It's a concentrated effort. That was the hardest thing. It's not, we all know how to breathe. The thing is, though, that you get better at breathing because you're so poor at it. You're poor at conscious breathing. You're poor at consciously breathing intelligently and understanding what's happening within the body to work the system to your benefit instead of the system working to you. Gravity is one of those systems that works for you and against you. Society is the same thing. When you understand working with breath, you might be going down the Colorado River in this float raft with 25 people on top of it. Then you look over at this kayaker and he's going the opposite direction, faster than you are going down it. You understand that there's eddies that go on, right? And so what you're doing is you're you're understanding and working with the energies instead of those energies taking you just down river and you're just, and that's what happens with breath. It's a transformation. It's 10,000, 80 times more important than it is to breathe than it is to eat. Should you, people just don't think about breath at all. They give it very little credence. And when you could understand how the system works intelligently, scientifically, and you could just think about it, and if you could get someone to breathe, at first people should practice 2 to 5 minutes every hour, because what you're trying to do is trying to, people will have an hour of practice, but what happens after the hour of practice? They go right within an hour. They feel euphoric for a couple hours, an hour or two, and then they just go back rather than patterns again. To me, if you break it up and you can practice 2 to 5 minutes every hour, you're reconditioning and resetting, remembering, and you'll start catching yourself holding your breath more often, because then you could expand it. People have a hard time doing this, like walking and chewing gum. But my God, how come we can't create better breathing patterns for everything that we do? Why can't we have breathing patterns and you can become more efficient? When you're sitting at a computer chair, you're almost in the fetal position. When you're sitting at a chair, it's a very poor way to be able to be an efficient breather when you're sitting down. Try it, because you don't have the ability to work your whole body. But the thing is, though, it doesn't mean that you're limited. Just like with people in wheelchair, it doesn't mean that you can't still practice better breathing. You can still do this breathing, practice better breathing to create more volume in the chest. But also it's about exhaling out, just using those solar plexus and those muscles and all that. You don't need to do crunchies, just do crunchies by squeezing. And then that's the whole thing, is that's what you're utilizing the muscles that are at play. You don't need to go, we get back to the Industrial Revolution, and now it's a privilege for people to go to the gyms. We pay a lot of fucking money to go to the gyms. We go to tennis clubs, you do all this kind of stuff. Before modernization, let's just say pre-1900, when the Industrial Revolution was starting to, really command us, right? Ford and the automobile. People still, it took a lot of energy to saddle a horse, to feed it, and to ride it. It takes a lot of energy to ride horses versus sitting in a buggy versus sitting in a car. We used to have to just wash our clothes by hands. We had to do everything, no vacuums, and there is no automated robot vacuuming. Everything we had to do is we had to breathe much more to be able to do these things. They forced us to breathe. It's like exercise, forced us to breathe. Then we became modernized, and our breath has become taken away more and more. Remote controls. And now we don't even have, we just speak it, right? And, Alexa, Jade. So I mean, the thing is, it's quite simple. And if you can become more efficient, just a little bit of technique changes in your breathing and understanding how to breathe, and to breathe while you're even just doing the mundane things. That's what this whole thing is about. It's not about the levels that I've taken it. I've pushed the boundaries to be able to show other people. I pushed them to show the magnitudes of the extremes that can be gone on. I mean, that's my journey. It's not everyone's journey, but no. Breath could be brought into everyone's journey as such, actively meditating.
I can see how there was a massive explosion in the interest in mindfulness. Has been around for thousands of years in the East, but the West had to name it something and turn it into a commercial activity, of course. So mindfulness became this huge thing.
Well, you want to be mindful? If you want to be more mindful, be a better breather, because there's no more mindfulness than that. When they study the brain and activity, they're looking for spikes of oxygen, right? For the brain activity that's going on. I think it's in MRIs. And so they're seeing how the spikes of oxygen. Well, so oxygen means the cells are active, right? Mm-hmm. So if the cells are active, you know what that means? The waste product is active. And what limits that cell is the ability to get that waste product out, that acidity out of the cell. The acidity is the thing that slows cellular activity down. So when you get good at breathing and you get good at understanding, directionalizing the energy, you could directionalize this energy. It takes work, of course, everything takes work. You could get better at directionalizing that energy in the process of excreting out that acidity through exhalation. So the better you get at exhaling out, the better thinker you're going to be. Your body becomes more efficient because it's not full of acidity slowing everything down. And that's what's key to all of this. You want to be a conscious being. You want to utilize all that noggin that's up there. They say, that in the mass, so it doesn't get used. Bullshit. It's there. It just uses us if we don't use it. You work the machine or you don't work the machine. It's called exercise. The brain is just a muscle, and it's not the seat of consciousness, to me. It's just a neural processor. People give too much credence to the eyes, to the nose, to the mouth, as far as the sights and the senses that go on here. And the mouth is for pleasure, but they just don't think about that mouth as a way of getting the most efficient energy system that we have, that we've underutilized. We just don't work it, and we don't work it properly. Exhalation is the key to all of this.
I'm aware that there are very different kinds of people listening to this, and in general, when we start to share more and communicate more, that there are people who will immediately just laugh at it and say, "Don't be this." No one cares about breath. We just do it naturally. There are people who say, "Oh, interesting," but they won't do anything, and there are people who just immediately start doing it. Like I did, I started doing it immediately. So it's like, because I think there's people who are ready to understand that breath is much more than just breathing like a lump of meat. There's more to this than consciousness. So can you talk more about where this takes you when you really start to dedicate yourself to it and it becomes your life?
When you're deacidified, when you're not full of shit, really, your eyesight changes, that everything becomes more acute. You see the beauty in everything, in all things. And it's like, for me, it's like, like with a flower, I garden, and to me, it's like I give back. I want to create, and a living garden is, you can make a painting and it's there. Living garden takes energy all the time. And so I don't grow vegetables. I grow them for my wife, but I don't really, but I grow them for the beauty of what they are. And I grow for this environment and bring in fresh oxygenated air all around me, bees, livelihood energies. And that's in the backyard. And then we come into the front yard and I have all these flowers out there too. And so I want to, to me, it's an example of giving back, to people, regardless of, and this young older couple that walks by every morning and talk to them, and they say, "Oh, I love the gardens," and to me, it's just, that's the important thing to me in creation. And so I'm out there and I'm working with my breath. It's I'm not here to. I invite the world to prove me wrong. I invite the world to prove the knowledge that I possess, the science behind it, that are associated with the ancient teachings. The word in itself, spirituality, comes from that word spiritus, which means to breathe. The word nirvana actually is a Sanskrit word meaning to blow out, as in candle. Through this state of exhalation, you will find this place. It's an action. Then through this action, you will have this thing. The teachings are all out there. They're all associated with breath. There's a document in 112 ways of enlightenment that I shared with the group. Mm-hmm. All of them, if you look at all of the major top ones, are all associated with breathing. And if you just accomplish one of those techniques, you could become enlightened. And so, the first thing that you do in this world is you come and take your first breath. The last thing you do is you take your last breath. So what are we? Besides this meat bag, You know, people want to say this body, and I've used this body to an extreme. I actually even did dance in college. I did a modern piece, but I took ballet and jazz. You know, I've always loved the expression of this body, and but who is the operator? You know, I don't need to. I was thinking about this today. I don't like, just like when I grow vegetables, I don't need to eat their essence. Their essence is there. When you're breathing with these plants and they're breathing back at you. I've had plants that I've had for 25 years, indoor plants, longer than my daughter, longer than any relationships ever lasted. And I'm saddened if something happens to them because they give so much to me. They give me this clean air in my house. You've been in here. Mm-hmm. And also when you cook and you think about cooking and you smell those wonderful smells, isn't all that energy that's in that food that's being cooked in the air? So can't you really just breathe in the essence from that love that's made? And there's energy, there's microparticles in every single breath that you're taking in with that kind of stuff. So just the experience and the highlighting of everything that you do, you know, the simplest things is sitting quietly in nature and just, you know, just listening to the rustle of the leaves, you know, on the trees and the birds and the squirrels. And, you know, I mean, it's be able to enjoy every single moment at every single time, even when there's stressful moments. You know, it's not necessarily enjoyment, but understanding that you will breathe through it and you'll get through it. And then most people, you know, they just get their breath taken away more and more and more and more. And the thing is that you know, it's just like an outside energy brings this toxicity. You want to stay balanced. The whole teachings is about balance. And if you look at toxicity is acidity. When you have an energy, whether it be a physical energy and you fall and you hurt yourself, now you have this toxicity that happens in a physical sense. But when you have this same kind of issue that happens from a real, you know, it's not a physical, but it's a verbal toxicity or non-said toxicity with a spouse, a parent, a fellow employee, your neighbor, you know, that creates the same acidity in the body. And then you actually start holding your energy in a certain way, and it makes you, you know, feel a certain way. And so that toxicity, if you could learn to breathe through it and you can understand that it's there, you just don't attach to it. You know, you just breathe through the whole process. I mean, and that's what really, in the nutshell, that's what the whole process that's happening in our bodies. We just become conditioned with this toxicity, this acidity. We don't have a way of getting it out. And it happens in the womb. People don't talk about what happens in the womb enough because we have no separation from our mothers. And that's something that whatever happens, whether it be an alcoholic, drug addict, or in a bad relationship, or angry, or depressed, or whatever, that gets right patented into the baby. And so we're born under this problematic problems of non-breathers. And so we can start getting our children to understand breath at an early age. You know, we can get them to be emotionally, as they mature, be able to be emotionally handle the processes instead of just being byproducts of a bunch of bad conditioning. And so the earlier they, you know, and it's just like what happens with the food process. You know, when your breath is the baby's breath, as the mother's breath is the baby's breath. So how the breath goes, it gets passed on, it gets that condition. But then what happens when we're born? All of a sudden, you know, the baby can't communicate, right? The baby's out there and it's like it can't talk yet. It needs to develop a whole other process, but it knows how to poo and to pee, and it knows how to laugh. It knows how to cry, you know? And so we don't want to hear it crying. And we always think that there's a problem with it crying. And so the easiest thing that we do is we put a bottle or the nipple or the bottle into the mouth and it placates it. So now we condition the babies from newborn to be, you know, emotionally, any kind of emotional problem gets fixed with a bottle. It gets fixed with food. So we're conditioned at a very young age to deal with all of our problems through fixation of oral fixation of food or other kind of oral fixation, you know, whether it be smoking or, you know, there's lots of them out there.
It's I better go soon. Got a call in 20 minutes. But one thing I'd like to ask is about the relationship between breath and awareness. So, you said that you were training a lot, you're exercising a lot, you started to do this breathing, then the awareness came, more awake, you're more alert, and all these things. Is that I think that for me, that's one of the key things for many people is they struggle to even do many things because they keep forgetting. They're so distracted through social media, through whatever, through their lives that they just constantly forget. So I found that to say to people, oh yeah, I keep forgetting because it's not, it does, they haven't, I don't know why. I just think it's something to do with the awareness and the breathing.
No, it's not about forgetting. That's just that's just an excuse. People are full of them. That you don't forget. It takes a lot of energy to block, but that's how people's behaviors are all about. That people forget to breathe. People don't think you have to breathe. Why do I need to do that? I've heard it so many times. The autonomic nervous system does it for you. Well, the thing is, if the autonomic nervous system does it for you, it's just like any other system. That means that you could practice it to make it better.
What I mean is that people's consciousness is very weak and their attention is pulled all over the place and they're not even aware of what they're not aware of. So I'm just saying that when you start to introduce something that requires awareness, they don't have it. So they forget. They say, oh, what?
Well, yeah, well, whatever. Put an app. People love to be able to follow stuff and put reminders, whatever, make little talks for people. I don't know. The thing is, though, you can't worry. Breath levels the playing field. It gives everyone the equal opportunity to work it. Doesn't matter if you're in Africa. Doesn't matter if you don't have this or you don't have that. You don't have shoes to run in. You don't have a bicycle to ride. Everyone has their breath. And whether you're going to work it or not, that's not my concern. It would be great. But the thing is, the more people understand and realize this, and how to work the system that they have, they're going to set themselves free. They're going to find acidity, unhappiness, depression, all these things are a buildup of acidity. When you get the acidity out of your body, you will find peace and balance. And if you want to take control over your life as an individual, you could do it through breath. There is no need for antidepressant drugs. There is no need for Ritalin. There's no need for any of these things. We know there's no need for any medications. There's no need for Ozempic. If you understand and work your breath, and you could do it at all times, you could deacidify your body. You could lose fat by just simply breathing out. And the more that you get it, you don't need to go to a gym. Doesn't require to buy any fancy clothes. People who are bedridden, people who are in wheelchairs, I don't care who it is. I don't care what you have in this world or not. You have your breath. It's pretty simple. We don't need to change everyone. You get it or not, doesn't matter. People are resisting things all the time, and resist truth. You want to live in your false reality. You want to live in that place, that Neo wanted to escape from. Some people want to go back in. I don't care if it's real or not, that stake, right? This doesn't matter. The thing is, though, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to be able to do it. People get it or not. Okay. It's the truth for everyone. And as I'm not, the thing is, I'm not here to, how can you, right? Okay, how many, 8 billion people? If we could affect a couple 100 million or a couple, how about 1 billion people? That'd be good enough, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Cool. Okay, how did that feel for you? Do you want
to fine. No, that's good. I'm fine. I'll transcribe